The originator and protector of this right and just system is not the law, but the king, who is neither slave to the law nor its instrument, who stands above the law and presides over it. Or so says the character of King Matthias in the work of Aurelio Lippo Brandolini, where a fictional Matthias debates the virtues of his kingdom against those of an Italian communal republic. Brandolini was one of Matthias's Italian humanist courtiers from later in his rule. Matthias began his rule already educated in the Italian pre-Renaissance humanist style. A lot of the credit for this goes to his tutor Ivan Vites, who provided Matthias with one of the finest humanist educations outside of Italy. Matthias's second marriage to Princess Beatrice of Naples in 1476 was also a big contributor to the spread of new influences and ideas from Italy. During his rule, Matthias tried to fill his court with equally educated courtiers, advisors, and officials, but because there was no domestic university to recruit from, the vast majority of them were foreigners, to the great distress of the estates of the realm. But at the beginning of his reign, amongst the most important of Matthias's advisors were Ivan Vites and his nephew Janus Pannonius. Pannonius was born in the Kingdom of Slavonia. He studied at Ferrara and Padua, travelled throughout Italy before returning to the realm to serve in the clergy and Matthias's state apparatus. He was made the Bishop of Pech. One of the big projects of King Matthias, Pannonius, and Vites was an attempt to establish a university within the realm. It would not only spread Italian humanist-style education and learning to the realm, but would also be a domestic educational system for the king's new officials. This was the fourth attempt to establish a university within the realm of St. Stephen. King Louis attempted to open one in Pech. King Sigismund attempted to open one in Obuda, twice, but those attempts ultimately failed, as did this one. Matthias's University of Pressburg, also known as the Universitas Istropolitana, opened between 1465 and 1467, did not survive beyond Matthias's reign, and even then the effort mostly fell apart after the disgrace and death of its patrons Vites and Pannonius in 1472, but that's a story for another day. The problem the universities faced, it seems, was that the founding generation of teachers was not succeeded by a new generation of teachers. The universities in the realm of St. Stephen lacked the urban and economic support structure that attracted teachers and students to the other more prestigious universities in the area like Vienna, Prague, and Krakow. Matthias's Universitas Istropolitana also lost teachers very quickly. The prominent astronomer Regiomontanus, who taught at the university, did not stick around for more than a few years, and most of the other teachers appear to have left after the death of the university's patron, Archbishop Vites. The university continued to exist on life support for the rest of Matthias's reign. In the absence of a proper university, the actual center of learning was Matthias's royal court. But even there, Matthias had trouble recruiting prominent humanists and educated men. He corresponded with a variety of them on a frequent basis and offered them his patronage. Most of them visited, but did not stick around. But they did send books to Matthias, and some of them dedicated their works to him. Matthias assembled a sizable book collection through his correspondence with humanists, through his diplomatic missions, and just from a network of booksellers and collectors. A few books were even sent by Lorenzo il Magnifico di Medici of Florence. Matthias's library, the Biblioteca Corvina, is estimated to have been the second largest in Europe at the time, second only to the Vatican. Only around 200 books from it exist today and are scattered around the globe at various institutions and collections. Most of the books Matthias collected were old-fashioned, hand-scribed and illuminated. But that new-fangled printing press was introduced to the realm in the 1460s and saw ever-expanding use by the 1470s. The first Hungarian printed book is the Budak Chronicle, completed in 1473. The first Croatian printed book was completed in 1483. The Missal, according to the law of the Roman court, printed in Old Croatian language and Glagolic script. A missal is a priest's handybook containing instructions and readings for holding Mass. The interesting part here is that it is not written in either Latin language or script, meaning that Masses in the vernacular were still being held in Croatia at the time, but I digress. There is another significant Hungarian chronicle by János Turoczi, made in 1488. It asserts that Hungarians are descendant from the Huns, and that the Huns are descendant from the ancient Scythians who had the tradition of electing their native kings. And King Matthias is strongly associated with an idealized version of Attila the Hun. Another of Matthias's courtiers, Antonio Bonfini, wrote about Matthias's heritage and attached the name Corvinus to Matthias, because of the raven on the Hunyadi's family crest, but also asserted the Hunyadi family descent from the allegedly ancient Roman Corvini family. By pushing these notions, Bonfini and Turoczi were trying to bolster Matthias's legitimacy at home and abroad. And they weren't the only ones. The humanists that did come to Matthias's court are described with the words second-rate and sycophantic, although I would argue that a lot of others tended to ingratiate themselves to their patrons. There was also another problem with attracting educated courtiers and keeping them in the realm. It wasn't just the lack of a prestigious university or underdeveloped urban areas or the increasingly overbearing patron and his entourage of sycophants. The problem was the culture of the entire realm. Janus Pannonius wrote about how he regretted leaving Italy, describing the realm of St. Stephen as a barbaric land, where Virgil's lyre would break and Cicero would be stunned into silence. The vast majority of the magnates and the nobility of the realm, that is, the most influential, were illiterate. They expected priests and other educated people to read and write for them. Being literate went against the societal role and ideals of the warrior nobility at the time. It wasn't their job. Their job was to fight. But it's also important to mention that the lower nobility was too poor to afford an education, while the magnates, who opposed the king, embraced their illiteracy, probably as a form of protest, although the generations that followed them did become literate. But this generation of opposing magnates did mock the king and his entourage for reading all day. Again, it also didn't help that a lot of the educated people around the king were foreigners. Lastly, Matthias had the royal palace in Buda and the royal castle in Visegrad renovated in new Renaissance styles. The works overseen by Chiamenti Camica of Florence and Giovanni Dalmata of Trogir. Now, all of this, the renovations, the patronage, the books, the university, all of that, were only a small portion of Matthias's expenses. I think it's about time we look into the realm's finances.